My golden sister for a long time didn't know what it meant to have a brother. I was her shadow and free babysitter. But a post on Reddit changed everything. I've always been the kind of guy who tries to avoid conflict at all costs, especially when it comes to family. I mean, who needs that kind of stress, right? So, when my sister, Karen, started having kids, I didn't really mind helping out every once in a while. Small things. Keeping an eye on my nephews during family events, taking them to the park for a bit. That was fine. It was what any good uncle would do. But somehow, that casual helping hand turned into me being the go-to assistant whenever we had family get-togethers. At first, I didn't think too much about it. We'd be at family barbecues, birthday parties, and random holiday events, and next thing I knew, I'd be watching over my 3 nephews, Liam, Noah, and Mason, while Karen and her husband, Jason, seemed to disappear into the background. Everyone else was mingling, having adult conversations, and enjoying the food, while I was wrangling kids. It wasn't like I volunteered for this role. It just sort of happened. If a kid was running towards something dangerous, guess who was expected to step in? Me. If one of them started throwing a tantrum over something trivial, it was automatically assumed I'd deal with it. And, for a while, I did it without complaining because, well, family, right? Then, last year happened. We were all supposed to go on this big family vacation to the coast, a fancy resort near Clearwater Beach, and I was genuinely looking forward to it. I had this vision in my head of relaxing by the water, sipping on some overpriced cocktail, reading a good book, and maybe even sneaking away for a bit of solo sightseeing. I had been working non-stop for months, and this was going to be the break I desperately needed. But when the details of the trip started to come together, I was hit with the bad news. I'd be sharing a room with my 3 nephews. At first, I didn't think it would be that bad. Karen assured me it would only be for a couple of nights, and I'd have plenty of time to do my own thing. She said Jason would handle the kids most of the time, and I could relax. That was a lie. We arrived at the resort, and the chaos started almost immediately. From the moment we unpacked, I was on babysitting duty. Karen and Jason disappeared to run errands, or get a quick drink at the bar, more times than I could count, and I was stuck in the room with the kids. Sure, there were a few moments when I got to step outside, but they were always short-lived. I'd barely have time to stretch my legs before Karen would text me asking if I could just watch the boys for a little bit longer. That little bit longer would turn into hours. I barely saw the beach, let alone had any time to relax. The vacation I had been looking forward to for so long turned into a week of nonstop childcare. I remember one night, about halfway through the trip, sitting on the edge of the bed while the kids were finally asleep and feeling utterly drained. I stared out the window at the pool below, where people were lounging, swimming, laughing, and there I was, a 30-something guy, stuck in a hotel room while my sister and her husband were off somewhere doing God knows what. I never got the chance to enjoy myself, and by the end of the trip, I swore to myself that I wouldn't let it happen again. Fast forward to this year. As soon as my parents started planning another family vacation, my gut told me something was off. Karen hadn't said much yet, but I knew the expectation would be the same. They'd assume I'd just fall back into the role of unpaid babysitter. But this time, I was determined to set some boundaries. I wasn't going to sacrifice another vacation just because my sister and her husband couldn't manage their own kids. So, I made a decision. I booked my own hotel, just a short distance from where the family would be staying. I figured it would give me a good balance. I could still spend time with them, but when things got too hectic, I'd have a place to retreat. It felt like the perfect solution. I even splurged a little and booked a nice room for myself. I was excited. This time, I'd finally get the break I deserved. But when I told Karen about my plan, she lost it. I'll never forget the look on her face, like I had just told her I was abandoning the family altogether. She immediately started in on how I was being selfish, how they were counting on me to help with the kids, how Jason had been so busy with work and needed the vacation just as much as I did. She even threw in some guilt about how the boys missed their uncle so much and how they were looking forward to spending time with me. I stayed calm, but inside, I was furious. I told her I loved my nephews, but last year's vacation had been a disaster for me. I didn't get to relax at all, and this year I needed my own space. That's when the real blow-up happened. Karen went off about how I was ruining the vacation, by being selfish. According to her, the whole point of a family vacation was to be together, and I was ditching them for my own benefit. My parents got involved soon after, and even though they didn't yell, they clearly sided with her. They tried to convince me to stay with the family, to compromise, and maybe help out just a little. I stood my ground. I wasn't about to be guilt-tripped into repeating last year's disaster. I posted about the situation on Reddit to get some advice because, honestly, I wasn't sure if I was in the wrong or not. Most people sided with me, saying I deserved to enjoy my vacation, that it wasn't fair for my sister to pawn her kids off on me. That gave me a little confidence, but it also made things worse with Karen. Somehow, she found out about the post. I don't know if someone sent it to her or if she stumbled upon it herself, but the fallout was immediate. She called me furious, saying I was making the family look bad online. She accused me of airing out our personal problems for the world to see, and things escalated from there. By the end of the argument, Karen wasn't just mad. She was done. She said she didn't want me on the vacation at all if I was going to act like this. Jason, unsurprisingly, stayed quiet during all of this, probably off somewhere working as usual. My parents were upset but still tried to play the peacekeepers, asking me to reconsider. But I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to bend this time. Then came the kicker. Karen canceled the entire family vacation. She said if I wasn't going to help, then there was no point in going, and now the whole family is pissed at me. They've blamed me for ruining the vacation, even though all I wanted was a little space to enjoy myself. Karen has stopped talking to me altogether. Every time I try to reach out, I get nothing but radio silence. It's been a few weeks since the whole thing blew up, and I'm still feeling the effects. My parents, after some time to cool off, admitted that maybe they were a bit unfair last year. They said they understand why I didn't want to be stuck in the same situation again, but even with their support, it doesn't change the fact that my relationship with Karen is fractured, maybe beyond repair. And Karen? She's still playing the victim. She spun this whole narrative where I'm the selfish brother who doesn't care about his family, and her husband, Jason, is conveniently absent from any of the drama. He's off working all the time, leaving Karen to deal with the kids, and she's decided that since he's not helping, I'm the next best option. It's exhausting, honestly. After the fallout from last year's family vacation, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to put myself in that position again. No more babysitting for an entire week while everyone else got to enjoy themselves. No more being the default person to wrangle the kids while Karen and Jason did whatever they wanted. I was done. So, when the topic of this year's vacation came up, I made a decision right then and there. I would go on my own terms or not at all. The idea of a separate vacation wasn't something I had planned initially, but after the disaster of last year, I knew I needed a break where I wasn't tethered to my nephews. As much as I love them, they're not my responsibility, and I wasn't going to sacrifice another week of my life to be their free nanny. So, when my parents started planning, I quietly booked my own hotel room at a nearby resort. That way, I could still be part of the family activities when I wanted to, but I'd have a safe haven to retreat to when things inevitably went sideways. It seemed like a perfect plan to me. When I told my parents and Karen about my decision, things got heated fast. Karen, of course, was the first to blow up. She started with her usual manipulation tactics, making it sound like I was being selfish for not helping out and how much Jason really needed this break. Her voice took on that familiar whine, the same tone she used when we were kids and she wanted something her way. She tried to make me feel guilty for not wanting to spend time with my nephews, even throwing in a few comments about how the boys had been asking about me and how excited they were to see their favorite uncle. I knew exactly what she was doing. She'd done it before. Karen has this way of spinning things, making it sound like you're the bad guy for not giving in, but I'd had enough of that last year. I stood my ground. I calmly explained that while I loved the kids, I needed my own space. I wasn't about to spend another vacation being their unpaid babysitter. That's when things escalated. Karen went from guilt-tripping to straight-up gaslighting, claiming that last year hadn't been as bad as I was making it out to be. According to her, I barely helped at all, and she had done most of the work. I was speechless for a moment. Was she seriously rewriting history right in front of me? I remembered the sleepless nights, the constant babysitting, the fact that I didn't even get to see the beach until the last day because I was stuck in the hotel room with the kids. Yet here she was, pretending like I had it easy. It was classic Karen. Distort the truth until it fit her narrative. But I wasn't falling for it. I calmly told her that I wouldn't be changing my plans and that I was entitled to a vacation just like anyone else. That's when she went nuclear, accusing me of ruining the family vacation. She said that if I wasn't going to help, there was no point in me even coming. She threatened to cancel the whole thing, which felt like a bluff, but still hit hard. I could see my parents were uncomfortable. They didn't say much at first, but I could tell they were leaning toward Karen's side, probably because they didn't want to deal with the conflict. After that conversation, I went online and posted about the situation on Reddit, hoping for some advice. The post took off. I wasn't expecting much, but hundreds of comments started pouring in, most of them supporting me. People were telling me I had every right to refuse to be used as a free babysitter, and that Karen was out of line. I'll admit, reading those comments gave me a boost of confidence. I wasn't crazy for wanting a break, and it felt good to have some validation from strangers. But that's when things really blew up. Somehow, Karen found my Reddit post. Maybe someone sent it to her, or maybe she was lurking on the same subreddit. But either way, she found it, and she was furious. She called me, absolutely livid that I had aired our dirty laundry for the internet to see. She accused me of making her look bad and claimed that I had exaggerated everything. She demanded that I take the post down immediately. I refused. The post wasn't hurting anyone, and more importantly, it was my way of drawing a line in the sand. If I took it down, it felt like I was admitting I was in the wrong, and I wasn't. The post was my insurance, a way to make sure that this whole situation didn't get swept under the rug. If I took it down, I knew Karen would just manipulate things again, and I'd end up right back where I started. So, I stood firm and told her no. Karen's reaction was explosive. She told me I was tearing the family apart, and that I had no right to put our business out there for strangers to judge. She even tried to pull Jason into it, though he stayed as silent as ever, hiding behind his work like he always did. She was used to winning these kinds of arguments, used to getting her way, but this time, I wasn't backing down. The fallout didn't stop there. After the Reddit post went viral, my parents started paying attention to the comments. At first, they were still trying to persuade me to change my mind. My mom kept saying things like, "It's just a family vacation. Can't you compromise?" Or, "Maybe you could just help out a little bit." But after reading some of the responses on Reddit, they began to see things differently. It wasn't just me who thought the situation was unfair. Hundreds of people were saying the same thing. Slowly, they started to come around. They admitted that maybe they had been a little unfair last year, expecting me to help out so much without ever asking if I was okay with it. That was a small victory, but the bigger conflict was still with Karen. She wouldn't let it go. Her anger over the Reddit post was only the tip of the iceberg. It came out during one of our last conversations that she had been paying me less than she should have for all the times I watched the kids. I never thought much about the money because, in my mind, I was helping out as family. But when she admitted that she had been underpaying me on purpose, even Jason seemed shocked. It was like she had this expectation that I would always be there to pick up the slack, and when I started pushing back, she didn't know how to handle it. In the end, she had no choice but to pay me back what she owed. She dipped into her own savings to do it, which I think was a huge blow to her pride. Karen's always been the type to keep tight control over things, especially money, and the fact that she had to admit she'd been wrong, that she owed me, was a bitter pill for her to swallow. Eventually, we had a family meeting. It was awkward and tense, but it felt like something that had been a long time coming. My parents apologized for putting me in that position last year, and even Karen managed a half-hearted apology, though I could tell she wasn't really sorry. Jason promised that they wouldn't drag me into their problems anymore, though I'm not sure how much weight his promises really hold. He's always been more of a background player, someone who's there but not really present, if that makes sense. Still, there was a sense of resolution, at least for now. We agreed that moving forward, I wouldn't be expected to take on the role of unpaid babysitter during family vacations. If I wanted to help out with the kids, it would be on my terms, and if I didn't, that was fine too. It felt like a win, but I wasn't naive enough to think the issue was completely settled. Karen's grudge-holding abilities are legendary, and I'm sure this isn't the last I'll hear about it. As for the future, I'm sticking to my original plan. I've already started making arrangements for my own vacation, separate from the family. I'll be staying at my own hotel, living by my own schedule, and if everything goes according to plan, I won't be involved in caring for my nephews again. At least, not during my vacation. If they need me for something, I'll help, but on my own terms this time. This is a line I've drawn, and I'm not crossing it again. After everything that happened, the Reddit post became a symbol of the boundaries I had finally set. My sister Karen hated that post. It was like a mirror she didn't want to look into because it showed the truth. I wasn't going to be her doormat anymore. It wasn't just about the kids or the vacation. It was about respect. Respect for my time, my boundaries, and the fact that I'm not her servant. She hated that the post put her in a bad light, and the fact that hundreds of strangers were siding with me just made it worse. But for me, that post was my line in the sand, a line I was not going to cross again. When Karen found the post, she lost her mind. She demanded that I take it down immediately, claiming I was ruining the family's reputation. I wasn't surprised. That's how Karen operates. She always cared more about appearances than the actual issue at hand. But this time, I wasn't backing down. I told her straight up that I wasn't deleting the post. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into doing something just because it made her uncomfortable. And honestly, the only reason I posted it in the first place was because I didn't feel supported by my own family in the first place. They always seemed to side with her, no matter how unreasonable she was being. I explained that until the drama stopped and I felt like I was being treated like an adult, that post was staying up. I wasn't some teenager that needed to be told what to do. I was a grown man who deserved respect, and I was tired of being treated like I was just there to make her life easier. It wasn't my job to pick up the pieces when her life got chaotic. I have my own life, my own responsibilities, and just because I don't have kids doesn't mean my time is less valuable. My parents were uncomfortable with all of this, to say the least. They asked me to take the post down too. They weren't as forceful about it as Karen was, but they tried to reason with me, saying that airing out family issues online wasn't the right way to handle things. But by that point, I had made my decision. I told them that I'd consider taking it down when Karen stopped trying to manipulate everyone and when they stopped enabling her behavior. They needed to stop treating me like a backup parent. That's what it boiled down to. Every time Karen had a crisis or needed help, my parents would jump in to defend her, no matter what. And I get it. She's their daughter, and they want to support her, but at some point, it felt like they were choosing her comfort over my boundaries. I wasn't asking for much, just a little respect, a little understanding that I didn't sign up to be her free babysitter for life. Karen, of course, wasn't ready to let this go. She tried to pull the same stunt she had done before, pressuring my parents to take her side. She cried. She played the victim, and for a moment, I thought my parents might cave again. But something shifted. Maybe it was because they had read all the comments on Reddit, or maybe it was because they were tired of the drama, but they didn't jump to her defense this time. Instead, they told her to deal with it herself. They said it was her problem to solve, not theirs. That was a turning point for me. I had never seen my parents refuse to come to Karen's rescue before. For the first time, they told her that maybe she should try being nicer to me instead of always expecting me to clean up her messes. Karen didn't take it well. She cried again, accusing me of turning the family against her. But the thing is, I wasn't doing anything to her. I was just standing up for myself. The fact that she saw that as a betrayal says a lot about how she viewed our relationship. Surprisingly, Jason, my brother-in-law, finally stepped in. He'd been silent through most of this drama, as he always was. He's not a bad guy, but he's passive when it comes to dealing with Karen. I think he just doesn't want to rock the boat. But this time, he apologized. He admitted that he hadn't done enough to protect me from Karen's demands. He promised that he would talk to her, that he would make sure I wasn't dragged into their problems again. It was a relief to hear him say that, though I wasn't holding my breath for any major changes. When the vacation finally rolled around, I stuck to my plan. I left early and checked into my own hotel, far enough from the family resort that I knew I wouldn't accidentally bump into anyone. I didn't tell Karen or my parents where I was staying. I wasn't taking any chances. I needed this vacation to be a real break, not another week of drama and babysitting. I even went so far as to make sure my hotel had strict privacy rules, so if anyone tried to call or find out where I was, they wouldn't be able to. Sure enough, Karen and my parents tried to track me down. They called the resort, asked the staff, but no one gave them any information. I was free. For the first time in years, I was able to enjoy my vacation on my own terms. No kids, no demands, just me doing what I wanted, when I wanted. I went to the beach, read my book, and even did a bit of sightseeing. It was everything I had hoped for and more. But, of course, Karen wasn't done yet. About halfway through the trip, she tried again. She called me and asked, no, demanded, that I babysit the kids for just a few hours so she and Jason could have a break. I couldn't believe it. After everything that had happened, after all the drama, she was still trying to rope me into her problems. But this time, I didn't even hesitate. I told her no, flat out. I wasn't going to spend my vacation looking after her kids. I had made my boundaries clear, and I wasn't going to let her bulldoze through them again. To my surprise, Jason backed me up. He told Karen to stop asking me for help. It was a small victory, but it felt huge. For the first time, Jason was on my side, and Karen didn't have the upper hand. She couldn't guilt me into doing what she wanted, and she couldn't rely on my parents to bail her out either. Even my mom tried one last time to guilt me into helping. She called me, telling me how tired Karen was, how much she needed a break, and how it would be such a big help if I could just step in for a few hours. But by that point, I was immune to the guilt trips. I told her straight out that it wasn't my job to look after Karen's kids. I wasn't their parent, and I wasn't going to sacrifice my vacation for someone else's responsibilities. It took a while, but eventually, my mom came around too. She admitted, begrudgingly, that I was right. It wasn't my job to take care of the kids, and I had every right to enjoy my vacation the way I wanted to. It felt like a long overdue acknowledgement that I had been waiting for. For years, I had been put in this position of having to take care of things that weren't my responsibility, all because Karen and Jason couldn't handle their own lives. But now, finally, I felt like I was being heard. As the vacation came to an end, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. I had stood my ground. I had set my boundaries, and for once, no one had trampled all over them. I had taken control of my own life, and it felt damn good. Sure, there were still some lingering tensions, and Karen probably wasn't done trying to manipulate the situation, but at least for now, I had my freedom, and I wasn't about to give that up again. Looking forward, I know there will be more family vacations, more events, and more opportunities for Karen to test my resolve. But now, I'm confident that I can handle it. I'm not her servant, and I'm not going to let her treat me like one. I've learned to say no, and I've learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. I'm done sacrificing my time and my peace of mind for someone else's convenience. So, as I pack up to leave my solo vacation, I feel a sense of accomplishment. I've broken free from the expectations that had been weighing me down for years. And while I know the road ahead might still be bumpy, at least now I have the tools to navigate it. No more guilt, no more manipulation. Just me, living my life on my own terms. By the time I had settled into my solo vacation, I thought the drama with Karen might start to die down. I had made it clear where I stood. I had drawn my boundaries and even physically distanced myself by booking my own hotel far from the family's resort. But I should have known better. Karen wasn't the type to let things go that easily, and sure enough, she kept trying to find me, as if tracking me down was going to change my mind. It was almost comical at first. She would send me texts asking where I was staying, claiming she just wanted to talk. But I knew what that really meant. It meant she wanted to guilt-trip me, to pull me back into her world of manipulation and demands. I ignored most of her messages. The few times I did respond, I kept it short, telling her I was on vacation and I didn't want to discuss family matters. That only seemed to make her more desperate. She even resorted to asking our parents if they knew where I was staying, but they didn't. I had been careful to keep my location to myself. Despite my efforts to keep a low profile, Karen wasn't backing down. She started complaining that I was making her life harder, that my refusal to help with the kids was stressing her out. According to her, Jason wasn't much help either, and she was left dealing with everything by herself. She painted herself as the victim again, just like she always did. But this time, I wasn't biting. I wasn't about to give up my peace for her chaos. What I hadn't expected was how far she would take it. At one point, Karen called me, accusing me of making her look like a bad mother. She claimed that by refusing to help, I was forcing her into an impossible situation, as if my lack of involvement was somehow responsible for her struggles. It was absurd. Her kids were her responsibility, not mine. But Karen had a way of twisting things, of making everyone around her feel like they were the problem. She even tried to bring our mom into it, telling her that I was being unfair and making things harder than they needed to be. But I didn't budge. When Karen realized she couldn't guilt me into helping, she brought up the Reddit post again. She was still furious that I had shared our family issues online, and she demanded that I take it down, claiming it was embarrassing for her. But I refused. I told her, once again, that the post was staying up until I felt like the situation had truly changed. I wasn't going to erase the evidence of everything I had been through just to make her feel better about herself. That was when things started to shift. My parents, who had been on the fence for a while, finally came around. They saw how far Karen was willing to go to manipulate the situation, and they realized that this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Karen's inability to take responsibility for her own life. For years, they had enabled her behavior, stepping in to fix things whenever she couldn't handle her own problems. But now, even they were starting to see that this had gone too far. They suggested that Karen should see a psychologist, which shocked me. My parents, who had always defended her, were now acknowledging that something was wrong. They admitted that Karen had been struggling to reconcile her old habits, her need for control, her inability to handle stress, with the reality of being a mother. They saw what I had been seeing for years, that Karen's behavior wasn't just manipulative, it was damaging, and they couldn't keep enabling her. Karen, of course, didn't take the suggestion well. She flipped out, crying again, accusing everyone of ganging up on her. She refused to acknowledge that she might need help, insisting that everything would be fine if I would just step in and help with the kids. But no one was buying it anymore. Even Jason, who had stayed quiet for most of the drama, finally spoke up. Jason said something I wasn't expecting. He told Karen that if she didn't start seeing a psychologist, he was ready to divorce her. He admitted that he had been turning a blind eye to her behavior for too long, hoping things would get better on their own. But now he saw that Karen needed help. Real help, not just someone to take the kids off her hands for a few hours. He even said something I hadn't considered before. He mentioned how Karen had been an only child for several years before I was born, and how he thought that might have contributed to her issues with control and attention. She had been the center of everything for so long, and when I came along, she didn't know how to handle sharing that space. It was something I had never really thought about, but it made sense. Hearing Jason say that was a turning point. For the first time, it felt like everyone was seeing the situation for what it really was. Karen wasn't just overworked or stressed. She had deeper issues that needed to be addressed, and it wasn't my job to fix them. It wasn't anyone's job but hers. In the end, we all agreed to give each other some space. My parents and I decided that we wouldn't see each other until Thanksgiving, which would give everyone time to cool off and hopefully allow Karen to start getting the help she needed. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the right one. For once, I felt like I wasn't the one making sacrifices for the sake of keeping the peace. Everyone else needed to step up and deal with their own issues. What was surprising, though, was how much support I got from outside the family. The Reddit post continued to get attention, and I ended up getting a lot of messages from people who had gone through similar situations with their families. It was comforting to know I wasn't alone in dealing with this kind of drama. One message, in particular, stood out. A woman reached out to me, saying she had been following my story and was impressed by how I had handled everything. We started chatting, and before I knew it, we had made plans to meet up when I got back from vacation. Her name is Emily, and she told me she could relate to a lot of what I had gone through. She had dealt with family drama in her own life and understood the importance of setting boundaries. It was refreshing to talk to someone who got it, who didn't try to make excuses for bad behavior or guilt-trip me into doing things I didn't want to do. We ended up hitting it off, and by the time I returned from my trip, we were officially dating. It felt like everything was finally falling into place. Looking back, I realized that this whole situation with Karen and the family needed to happen. For years, I had been biting my tongue, trying to keep the peace, trying to avoid conflict. But that only made things worse in the long run. By finally standing up for myself, by refusing to let Karen manipulate me anymore, I had not only set boundaries but also forced everyone else to face the truth. It wasn't just about me being a free babysitter. It was about Karen's inability to cope with her own responsibilities and my parents' role in enabling that behavior. Now, I feel like I can breathe again. I know there will still be challenges ahead, especially when Thanksgiving rolls around and we all have to see each other again. But this time, I'm going into it with a sense of confidence and clarity that I didn't have before. I know where I stand, and I know what I will and won't tolerate. Karen still has a long way to go, and whether or not she chooses to get the help she needs is ultimately up to her. But I'm not going to be dragged down by her issues anymore. As for my parents, they've started to see things more clearly too. They've admitted that they played a part in this whole mess, and they're making an effort to step back and let Karen figure things out on her own. It's not easy for them, but I think they're starting to realize that sometimes the best way to help someone is to stop helping them at all. In the end, I've learned that standing up for yourself isn't about being selfish, it's about protecting your own well-being. I've spent too much time worrying about what other people think, about keeping the peace at the expense of my own happiness. But not anymore. I'm finally living life on my own terms, and it feels damn good. If you like the story, don't hesitate to subscribe and listen to new stories every day. Write in the comments what you like the most.